Thank you for joining today's Teaching with Technology Brown Bag session, Prompt Engineering. Our presenters today are Dr. Dina Kurzweil, Director of the ETI, and Heather Johnson, current Director of the FNP and WHNP programs. To start us off with the goals for today's session is Dr. Kurzweil.
Okay, so what you see in front of you right now is our goals for today's session. If you can take a minute and review them, the basics are we're hoping you'll be able to describe the relevance of prompt engineering to medical and nursing education. We're hoping you'll be able to explain the key principles of effective prompt design and apply techniques to generate effective prompts for various educational purposes. Our last goal is to have you be able to identify ethical considerations related to the use of AI in medical and nursing education. So jumping into it here, what is generative AI? So generative AI, also known as AI or Gen AI, are tools used in large language models called foundation models, which learn patterns from data and create new content. AI is trained on large amounts of unlabeled data, which allows it to predict a word, a sound, or a pixel that would come next in our pattern. And that data is used to respond to your question and prompts. Your AI tools are only as recent as the last time the AI tool was updated. So that could be weeks, months, and years. And it's important for you to understand when that is occurring. So what is prompt engineering? Well, prompt engineering is the process of creating effective inputs to guide the AI models, like Gemini, which we have here it uses, towards generating a desired output. The data is used to respond to that question or what is called a prompt, and it involves understanding the model's capabilities and limitations to elicit accurate, relevant, and insightful responses. So really, to boil it down, you're putting in a question or an idea into a system to get a response to your question that comes from how the model was trained. At USYS, we have Gemini currently, and basically we have an enterprise license for the use of Gemini within our Google Workspace suite. So if you have a USYS email account and are interested in adding Gemini to your portfolio of tools, go ahead and contact the help desk. So what is the relevance of prompt engineering and AI to medical and nursing education? Well, it's relevant for these health professions because AI is rapidly changing healthcare. It's supporting the ideas of development, personalized treatment plans, virtual health assistants, synthetic data generation, chatbots, medical imaging. And in order to be a prepared health professional, you need to use and leverage AI tools effectively and responsibly. It's also used to enhance teaching and learning experiences. Your AI tools, or your Gen AI, as we're talking about specifically here, can be used by helping you develop simulation-based learning, content creation, interactive learning tools. It can help with assessment, research, and a huge swath of other areas. So getting up to speed on AI and AI-related tools like Gen AI is important to the ever-evolving health professions landscape. So to kick us off, I'd like to go over some key principles of effective prompt design. So on this list, you can see the components that are required, I would like to say, for doing effective prompt engineering. These are key principles. And I want you to take a quick look to familiarize yourself with what they are. And then I'm going to go into more detail on each of these. But the basic pieces we're talking about here, or the components, are a role, a voice, and a tone, a task, a context, an example, constraint or format, and then the idea of iteration. So let's jump into understanding a bit about the role, voice, and tone. One of the first things that we like to tell people to do is to think about the role that the AI, the Gen AI, should be thinking about in your prompt, as well as the voice and tone of the inputs and level of knowledge. So for a voice example, you could consider providing the AI the tone, the voice, and experience of, let's say, in the voice of a full professor of nursing who is a seasoned educator, create me a something, whatever that something's going to be. But you can see here the idea of a full professor may change the language that the AI gives you in terms of its response. A seasoned educator is going to change the tone and the wording versus somebody who may not be so specific. The role, tone, and voice really does change how Gen AI responds to you. And it's an important thing to think about. There are times where you may want it to be in the voice of a full professor of nursing who is sending out a friendly message. Well, that gives me a better sense of tone. I want it to be a friendly message. Or if I'm not somebody who wants this friendly message, it could say in a stern voice. So think about these as you're starting to create your prompts. So the next key piece of prompt engineering is to really use precise language and avoid ambiguity. One of the important pieces here is you want to try and break down complex questions. So instead of tell me about diabetes, you may want to ask it in terms of the task and clarity, what are the key pathophysiological mechanisms involved in type 2 diabetes? Very similar question, but more specific. And it breaks down something that's fairly general into something specific. And you can think about it this way. You can use a book to learn about the general aspects of diabetes. But when you use mesh terms in PubEd, you get more specifics on the individual question. And that's really the important piece here is the task you want done really needs to have that precise language. So in this slide, we're talking about the context and the need for you to provide sufficient background information so that the AI understands the actual task. So for example, you may want to say a 50-year-old female with a history of hypertension and obesity may be part of that example that we just talked about with diabetes. So you may be asking it to tell me about the key pathophysiological mechanisms involved in type 2 diabetes for a 50-year-old female with a history of hypertension and obesity, and presents with whatever you want to add to it. But there needs to be some context around the information you're providing, or else the AI is just going to jump around and pull things on its own. So having an example in prompt engineering is crucial because it provides a clear illustration of the desired formatting style. It guides the AI model towards generating more accurate and relative responses. This example serves as a form of showing rather than just telling the model what you expect, reducing ambiguity and increasing the likelihood of successful outcomes. So I may want to, in that previous example, say, provide it, let's say, in a bulleted list that is done in a hierarchical method. I may say and provide an actual example from something else I saw. So in the same manner this is presented, present my information in that same manner. But being able to tell the AI how you want it to actually be presented is going to result in more successful outputs from the AI and less iteration. Now, a lot of people tell me sometimes that's hard to do because I don't know what I'm really looking for here. And so that becomes part of that back and forth between you and the AI. It's kind of becoming your partner, your teammate, and your support in idea generation. So think about when you're collaborating with somebody and you're working on some sort of a document. You kind of go back and forth with the person to figure out what it's going to look like, how it's going to sit. And you're doing this exact same thing with the AI in your prompt engineering back and forth. So getting even more specific here, it's really important to specify the format, length, and style of the output. So moving even deeper into the example, you may want to talk about the fact that you want a bullet point list of 5 key nursing interventions for this patient with diabetes. You may want to say that it should be no more than 2 pages. You may want to tell it that it should be done in APA format or MLA format or whatever you want. Make it even more specific and tied to your desired final output. And then lastly is this idea of iteration. just like when you're brainstorming with somebody, you go back and forth and you need to think about refining what you're asking, refining what it's giving you, and refining that output. So refining prompts based on the responses helps improve accuracy. It also gives you something to react to. I would say 95% of the time when I stick something into Gemini, the output isn't exactly what I want, but it's close. And if I iterate asking it more specificity in its response or providing more specific details, or even if I rephrase the question, it allows me to improve the output, getting closer to my desired outcome. And that is that back and forth piece. As I said, think about it as your collaborative partner here, just like you would with a teammate. So let's apply some of these techniques and think about how this could happen. So what makes an effective prompt? Well, clarity ensures that the AI understands the request. Context provides the necessary background information. The objective clarifies the expected outcome, and the constraints in the context define the boundaries. So you start with identifying kind of this idea of the goal of the prompt and whether it's generating educational content, whatever it's going to do. But you want to be sure to provide relative context to guide the AI's response and set those clear parameters. So you can see in this examples, we have the role, the voice, and the tone. And then we get into the task. We want an asynchronous assignment focusing on current issues. And we want the context. The assignment should be easily integrated into this type of course. So we continue going by providing an example. We want to provide the text of a similar assignment or something that we're going to put in. And then we want to make sure that we have the proper constraints and formats that we're looking for, and including maybe specific directions. In mine, I asked for a rubric of it. So I'm going to switch and show you an example of what happened when I put that prompt in. So this gave me a wonderful intro. You can see there's an assignment overview. It breaks the assignment down for me, as I asked, with specific directions, and has some areas where it wants me to enter information by X date, you can see in here. Or it could say in here that you want to talk about something like this, or it may give me a prompt to add something. But you can see it's given me a topic selection with a percentage of the grade it would be, the exploration and synthesis with the percentage, information about the comparative analysis. It continues to go through the different pieces that it wants. It talks about the reflection aspect of it and the application, and then it provides me a rubric. Now, is this exactly what I wanted? No. Is the rubric exactly what I wanted? No. But I think for most of us, we realize that reacting to something and iterating with something is much easier than trying to think about it from scratch. And this does a really nice job of providing me those basics so that I can move forward and save a lot of time. You know, once you've gotten this is the time where you come to possibly with the generative AI and start iterating it for yourself. But a lot of times I've worked with faculty who have brought me the output of it and said, hey, this is what I got. I think it's pretty close. What do you think we should do to make this more clear, to make this more aligned? And we can talk about it. That's when you bring in your experts and you start discussing what this is. You bring your syllabus over to the ETI or your assignment, and we'll help you think through all the specifics that need to actually be there. But it really is, what I'd like to say is your partner to help you think about what is the art of the possible. Again, I want to emphasize no final AI output is going to be exactly what you want. I'd say that's a rarity, but it's going to get you close, and absolutely get you close if you use our ideas here about the key principles of effective prompt engineering. It'll get you to, at a minimum, a 70% solution, at a minimum, which is a great jumping off place. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Johnson, to talk about developing competency-based assessments using prompt engineering.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kurzweil. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody will stick with us because we're going to kind of drill down into a specific example. This is academic, but I think that the what we're going to talk about is a little bit broader. Like, you can infer a lot of things that you can do with AI. So Gen AI can streamline the creation of assessments and materials for competency-based education. To do this, you're going to start with the backward design by developing the assessment first. Aim for assessments that demonstrate competency through simulations, case studies, patient interactions, and presentations, not just traditional exams. It's only after you're satisfied with the assessment that you'll create the grading rubric and materials. Provide detailed input, including, in the case of competencies, the domain, the competency, and the observable behaviors you want to measure, and examples such as course descriptions or existing assessments, especially if you upload a PDF of a previous assignment or example. On the following slides, we'll walk through an example of specifically crafting an effective prompt for assessment development. If we go back to the prompt examples that Dr. Kurzweil provided, we're going to develop a prompt for a leadership competency. So for our purposes, we're identifying ourselves as a faculty member in the class that we're teaching. Our focus in this case is Domain 10 of the AACN Essentials competencies, which focuses on personal, professional, and leadership development. While GenAI can develop assessments and materials for multiple competencies simultaneously, we're going to focus on just one for simplicity. We're going to use competency 10.3, develop capacity for leadership, and we can choose a core behavior example from the competency implementation guide, such as the one on the slide. Context is key for effective assessment creation. So some options here might be to copy and paste the course description and competencies, or you can specify a delivery format and assessment style. For this task, we're going to tell it that the course is in person and request an assessment that demonstrates the skill, avoiding traditional exams. It can create traditional exam questions for you, especially if you upload your slide set. It can also revise existing exam questions to help you make them better, especially if you give it parameters. Examples help AI to create more precise assessments. Some examples you could provide are existing assessments or exemplars from resources like the Competency Implementation Guide. In this case, we used detailed examples from a national organizations guide, which provided suggested assessments for various growth levels. Even if you don't have this level of detail, provide as much context as possible to minimize iterations and ensure accurate results. We want to make sure that the students are demonstrating what they've learned, not how well they can search AI. So we want to make it difficult to complete using AI tools. After you generate the outputs, you can actually ask AI to explain to you how it designed the task to limit AI reliance. Okay, so hold on to your hats here because the next slide pulls together everything we've discussed on the last 6 slides. It's going to be a lot of information, so that's why I wanted you to prepare yourself. But this is still actually a pretty basic prompt. Remember that the more details you provide, the better the output is going to be. So this is what the full prompt looks like. This is everything that I would type or copy and paste into the prompt location. I did color code it so that it would align with the components that Dr. Kurzweil outlined. So if you wanted to go back for clarification, you can actually go to the color-coded slides for more information. The initial response included everything, the assessment, the rubric, and the materials, even though I only asked it for the assessment. I refined it by asking for only the assessment, purpose, and detailed assessment instructions. And then I asked for a more concise version so I could put it on the slide for the purposes of this presentation. So this is the more concise version. So I put this on here for illustration. The title would probably need some tweaking. AI is sometimes good at being creative, but sometimes it's not so great at being creative. If you don't like what is presented, you need to give it correction or direction at this step because you want it to be accurate before it develops the next step, which is the rubric. Otherwise, you'll need to make corrections later. GenAI excels at designing detailed, objective, and specific rubrics. It made sure to tell me that I should weight my rubric category based on the importance I think that it should have. For Gemini users, depending on the prompt, it may or may not be able to export or import to sheets. So copying and pasting and manual adjustments might be required. This can be a little bit frustrating while importing, exporting, or analyzing data. One time I asked it to analyze some data that was on a spreadsheet that I had entered into Gemini, and it told me that I should analyze the data. I recently learned that this is actually called usable laziness, and you can overcome this by using emotional requests. So usable laziness is actually something that it learned from humans, that humans don't like to do a lot of monotonous things like analyzing a whole series of data. And so it kind of pushes back because it doesn't want to either. So you can overcome this actually by using emotional requests. This is really interesting because you can implore it by saying, hey, I really need you to do this because my whole job depends on this. Or I really, really need to get a good product. So please, do a really good job. So you kind of have to keep a good sense of humor and be a little bit patient as you're going through this. So here's an example. The first version it gave me didn't have the specificity that I wanted. For example, it used the word understand, and I wanted a more measurable objective. So I had to iterate it to get it to a place where I felt like was in alignment with what I was looking for. After you create the rubric, you can ask it to create a topical outline and materials. Thoroughly examine all outputs, especially watch the math that's performed by AI. When I originally asked it to create a topical outline, it came up with 5.5 hours of content when I asked it for 4, and it actually said that it was 4 hours of content. The same goes for statistics. It's pretty good at telling you what statistical tests you might use and how to perform it, but even if you give it the right inputs, it might not give you the right output. The output that is generated might not be accurate. So you can't necessarily trust it. So math, citations, competencies, they could all be wrong, even when you provide the correct input. In one case, it reverted to a previous set of competencies that I had never even uploaded to it. But I noticed that it wasn't correct, and I asked it if it had reverted to a previous set of competencies, and it apologized to me and said, "My mistake. I will use the competencies you provided in the future." If you're satisfied with everything so far, ask it to provide materials and activities to prepare students for the competency assessments, such as suggested readings, case studies, skill building exercises, simulations. But be cautious with the AI-generated citations and materials. If it doesn't have something in its memory, it can hallucinate, or I like to call it confabulate, or invent sources that may not exist. Sometimes they can look very convincing and may even contain elements of reality, such as a real title, but have a wrong author or topic. So even if you ask it, are these real citations? Its response isn't always reliable either. So always verify materials independently to make sure that they're accurate and evidence-based. It's gotten a lot better at this and now can even give you a link to the material if one is available. So on this slide, there's some examples of some citations that it gave me based on the search that I conducted, and just showing you which ones were real and which ones were confabulated. You can then drill it down and have it create the outline for a slide set. It isn't yet able to create a slide set for you or a spreadsheet for you, but it can give you the materials to paste into a slide set or spreadsheet like in the outline. You can ask AI to help you make your presentation more interesting by putting polling questions into the outline, suggesting images, creating case studies or discussion questions. And you can even ask it to where it should go into the outline. Gemini Basic doesn't develop images. You have to have the advanced version, and none of the AI platforms are great at making accurate illustrations. You might still end up with misspelled words on the image or words that look like they're in Latin or Russian, like the image that's on here. If you look closely, it sort of looks maybe Greek, or it might create an image that has a person with 6 fingers or 3 legs. And even when you ask it to refine the image and you show it where the problem is, it still can't identify and correct the problem. So it's still a work in progress. There are some image generating softwares that are much better. And a lot of times you can tell when some of these images are generated by AI. I have to say that, in my opinion, Gemini is better at creating realistic images than something like ChatGPT. But it's not reliable. So a couple of times I asked it to create an image that was, based on prompts that were very similar to things that I've produced before. And it said, this is a work in progress. I am not able to do that with this version. So it's sometimes a little bit frustrating. So one of the things that Dr. Kurzweil mentioned that I would like to reiterate is that all of the outputs that it creates are still going to need refining. So generally speaking, you're not going to be able to expect a 100% solution based on what it generates, but it does give you a starting point, which can be a huge time saver. If you asked it to create a case study, and now I'm asking it to create a simulation, you will notice that there are often commonalities between the two, but it's okay because it's at least a starting point.
So let's talk a little bit about some of these ethical considerations that we need to really think about as we're using this tool. And this is really paramount for what we're trying to do. With any new technology, we need to be mindful that AI is trained on basic data from a specific point in time, but can be continually trained on information you provide. Our version of Gemini here at USIS is partitioned just for us, but you still need to think about what you're going to enter and provide. So remember, really consider, we need to use the approved tools here, and Gemini is an approved tool. So do not use tools that are not approved by USIS. We really have to stay within the confines of our approved tools, especially when we're putting information that could be sensitive in nature, that could be intellectual property. All of that is getting shared. So stick with our approved tool set. And if you're not sure where to do that, if you go to our USIS intranet site, if you have access, you can do a search on approved software and you'll get a nice big list of what is approved. We also need to consider bias. AI models can reflect the biases of their training data, just like any other data that you put in. So you need to be aware of the potential biases in AI outputs and teach yourself and your learners to critically evaluate them. Again, hitting on the privacy, ensure compliance, especially if you're putting any type of data in, whether it be patient data, whether it be research data when using these AI tools. And thinking about over-reliance, let's not forget about that human element. Critical thinking and clinical judgment are still paramount. As I said earlier, you really want to consider phoning a friend like they do on those game shows and getting somebody to help you continue this brainstorm instead of just 100% relying on the AI to do it for you. You also want to look at the ideas of AI learning. Again, remember that anything you put in an AI system can be used to generate future responses. So we need to just use approved USIS tools. But think about it this way. If I'm asking an AI to generate me a set of test questions, and I get a bunch, and I like them, and then my students ask that same AI tool to generate a bunch of test questions, the AI could take my conversation on the initial development of those questions, and guess what? They could get the questions. I underline that could, okay? But bad for the faculty as you're really not measuring the student learning anymore. So you really need to be careful about how you're using the tool, thinking about the broader implications of how it could be futuring other people's responses to their prompts. So like I said again, and we've hit this numerous times throughout the presentation, bring in the human element, have a conversation about it, and think through what you're trying to do and why. You may not need AI for everything. You may just need it as a launching point to get you where you want to go. I also want to comment one piece that Dr. Johnson brought up. I've literally had AI give me beautiful APA-style format references. You have to do that initial review and critical review of every single piece of research it may say it's giving you. I have spent hours and hours looking for something that it gave me, and it just didn't exist. It was completely fabricated. It sounded like a great resource. I was excited to be able to use it because boy, did it hit the mark, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And I spent a lot of time looking. So also keep in mind as you're thinking about the ethical side of all of this, of that rabbit hole. It was such a great resource. I spent way too much time looking for it. And if it was something that, I had heard about I should have stopped way before. So remember that there can be this, what I call the rabbit hole effect. It sounds good. It must be out there, but it isn't. So keep focused on what you're trying to do. And if you can't find it rather quickly, I'd say you're better to be on the side of caution and not use that resource if you can't verify it.
Thank you for watching today's Teaching with Technology Brown Bag. You can view all Teaching with Technology Brown Bags on the USU YouTube channel under the full ETI playlist. Have a nice day.